I'm just going back to this Ranciere quote that I seem to be obsessing on, to do with the what he calls the poetics of knowledge, which I think is, yeah, that's right, where he's basically talking about a set of linguistic practices by which we, just ways of talking and ways of writing, by which we make our writing look as if it's scientific. I'm paraphrasing for clarity here, really. But that's basically what he's saying, is that if we want to make our writing look as if it's empirical science, and usually that would be because it is empirical science, but if we wanted to do it even if it wasn't, then there are a set of linguistic strategies we can deploy to have that effect. And the one I've spoken about before, for example, is the suppression of the first person. If you take yourself out of it, don't use the word I or me anywhere in it, it starts to look as if you're writing about some kind of interpersonal, transcendent truth rather than just your personal opinion. So it starts to acquire the condition of the apparent condition of objective empirical knowledge, as an example. But there's a whole range of other strategies he's referring to there, I think. But what I'm thinking of in relation to that is, okay, so that's a set of practices, a set of strategies by which this stuff, as he says, it escapes from literature and acquires the status of knowledge and testifies to that status. One of the things I always wonder about that is, what about poetry? You know, well, what's the status of literature? What is this literature it's escaping from? And what's it? And what else escapes from literature? Is empirical scientific writing the only set of strategies which lead to this escape from literature? And what escape route does poetry take, and what kind of strategies does it mobilise? I think for me there's two things there. I think it's two anyway. One is that I mean, there certainly does seem to the precursor to this is that certainly a lot of poetry and poetics is contextual. So, you know, pretty much any writing can be poetic if it's in a poetic context. But if you look at the actual poetry itself, at the grammatical and syntactical and linguistic strategies divorced from that contextual effect, you know, the question there is, are there a series of strategies by which poetry, in its construction, escapes from literature and becomes poetry? I guess an investigation of that would be an investigation of stylistics, and this isn't really my zone of comfort, really, but what little I know about stylistics is that, you know, there are analytical techniques and literary analysis techniques which reveal stylistic choices that allow poetry to exist as poetry and to reveal itself as such. I'll try and find out more about that, I think, 'cause it's quite interesting. And allow it to escape so that we recognise it, or we assume that it's poetry, in the same way that when we read a piece of writing in which the first person pronoun is suppressed and which use lots of visual metaphors, for example, we assume this is scientific writing. Again, if we read certain other pieces of writing, we unproblematically understand them as poetry. The second thing which follows on from that, really, apart from this thing about stylistics, is to do with worldview. When I was talking before about, I'm not sure worldview is the right word, but construction of a world, simulation of a world in language. When I was talking about scientific writing, simulating a scientific worldview, what I was trying to get at with that was that things like this suppression of the first person pronoun, the I, that you find in scientific writing, is there because it simulates the condition of the worldview you would need to adopt in order to follow scientific practices. If you relied on your own opinion the whole time and you were actually carrying out scientific experiments, you wouldn't get very far. You would not produce empirical knowledge. So there are interpersonal and impersonal procedures in place in science which extract that first person viewpoint at the level of the practice, and that worldview is simulated in the language, so the I is removed, plucked out. So what kind of worldview does poetry do? That's, I guess, my question. If stylistics is a set of techniques which allows poetry to escape from literature, whatever literature is, and acquire this status as poetry, what's being simulated? What is the what worldview is being simulated in that poetic writing? I haven't got an answer for that, and I suspect there isn't an answer for it. I don't think there is the same one-to-one relationship. I think it's much more, I'm tempted to say words like primordial or primitive or atavistic or something like that, because it feels to me more like an analysis of poetry as worldview, as simulation of world, is to do with a world in flux and a world in the process of its creation, an attempt to not to simulate the world as experience, but the world as process and formation, a world that's that's being made and remade, and may be incoherent at times, and may be paradoxical, and may be reflective of all different kinds of worldviews simultaneously, not the singular coherent worldview that science offers. But I may be wrong. Who knows?